to the Talent Optimization Podcast, the go-to podcast for CEOs and HR professionals wanting to bridge the gap between the strategy and tactical implementation of talent optimization within their organizations. Through interviews, predictive index, and personal experience, your host, Tracy Shirk, helps you discover the facets of talent optimization from both a CEO and HR perspective to truly create the dream team for your organization. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Gratitude. What exactly is gratitude, especially when we're showing gratitude to our staff? And so often when we're having conversations with staff and with managers, it's giving that really simple thank you. But there's so much more to designing a culture in an organization where we actually show that gratitude towards our staff day in and day out. And one of those key ways that we can really do that is through our culture, is through our policies and through how we create our benefit plans and programs. So with me today as a guest on our show is Rachel Leader, and Rachel is a benefits consultant with Johnson Financial Group. And I have to say, one of the things that it had me so attracted to Rachel was how she was able to look at things that are boring, benefits, boring, and actually really tie that into the why individuals come to work and why organizations are in business. So Rachel, welcome to Talent Optimization.
Thanks, Tracy. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for the introduction. And it really is an interesting time in the world, obviously, but really taking that benefit perspective of people come to work as their whole selves. So really looking at a multi-generational workforce of where are we, where can we go, and what do we really want our company culture and our benefits to look like is kind of that unique intersection of kind of where we're headed in this post-pandemic world.
Yeah, and you said something really interesting, and that was people come to work as their whole selves. And when they bring their whole selves to work, they're not only bringing that knowledge, that skill, that ability, they're bringing those values that they have and kind of what those behavioral drives are that they have, which means not every person wants the same thing. So how do we create a benefit program that actually shows how much gratitude we have for our staff while ensuring, we're meeting our business results and we're meeting our metrics and our staff have what they need to live that fulfilling life?
Absolutely. I was just reading a study from MetLife that said 72% of employees say that having the ability to customize their benefits would increase their loyalty to their current employer. So when we're looking at that generational shift of millennials and Gen Z and the apps where you can customize your Starbucks order, they're looking at employers of if I can customize every single other aspect of my life, why can't I do that on my benefits? What can my employer offer that gives me that independence and that, self-service aspect that we don't currently have in a lot of smaller employers?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that that's key, especially for our listeners who, for the most part, are smaller employers, right? Those individuals that, have groups of 50, 100, 200 individuals that they're serving and saying, how do we make these numbers work in a way that we can really provide what our individuals need? And so one of the things that I'm curious about, Rachel, is when we talk about, an inclusive work culture, ensuring that we're providing an environment for every individual to thrive regardless of what that background is, regardless of kind of what their preferences are, all of those things. How do we specifically do that with benefits?
Yeah, so the first thing that every employer should really be thinking about is communication. There is a huge gap between an employer's expectations of an employee's understanding of benefits and how an employee actually understands their benefits. And, it kind of is showing up more in a financial literacy sense, but it's also a benefit literacy sense of, do you know what a deductible means? Do you know what a coinsurance means? Depending on your family background, that might not be something you've ever been taught by your parents, by your peers, by schooling definitely doesn't touch on any of that sort of stuff. So it's how do you teach employees to be better consumers And so it's building communication plans starting from the ground up, but making it accessible so that no one feels uncomfortable asking or being shown kind of the basics and the foundations that they can build upon from there.
So when you say that, Ask Alex app, do you know what I'm talking about? Essentially, it was this app that I could go home and as I'm sitting with my husband, we could actually go through this app and say, hey, we've got 2 kids, or hey, we've got this coming up or that coming up. And it would really help us to understand, here's what your benefit plan offers based on what you put in. Here's some of those key things to really think about. Whereas it's not me calling my HR person and sharing information that I don't really want to share with them as I am sitting here as the HR person, right?
Right, absolutely. It's protecting your privacy and also recognizing that family decisions are made by the family, not necessarily in the workplace. So having the open enrollment meetings during the day is very common, but do you also record them or give the family an opportunity to hear the same information? Or does it become a game of telephone for the staff member to then tell their spouse who might be the decision maker within their household?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to just kind of take this whole conversation on communication and really look at it as an organizational item. If you go back to podcast number 26, where we were specifically talking about creating your dream teams, it's essentially what the Harvard study states. So as we're having the benefits conversation today, I really want you to be thinking about it in terms of what about all of those things that we're doing in our organization and how do we look at this across the board? Because we can make those same incremental changes in all of our areas.
Absolutely. And it's definitely one of those things that like employee communication is not just a benefits issue. And it's not just communication of the basic benefits, but as you start looking at diversity and inclusion initiatives, how do those get communicated to the employees? And how would an employee know where to go to access those benefits? Because to your point, you may not be comfortable asking your HR person every time you have a question, or if you have a question about, fertility benefits, you might not want to share that. So it's having that open communication of here's where to access the information and having it be consistent enough that the employees don't hear it once a year and forget about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we think about our employees and truly having gratitude for who they are, because that whole person comes to work, having our benefits be inclusive of what our population is, right? You just talked about fertility benefits, but I know that there's several others out there. What are they?
Yeah. So other things, fertility benefits is probably the biggest topic when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, because that's when you can really help the LGBTQ plus community do adoptions, IVF, surrogacy, all of those things. But it's really on a broader spectrum, looking at student loan repayments or caregiver leave. As the boomers continue to age and our age demographic and millennials and Gen Z are going to become caregivers, how can your employer support your family makeup and how you need to care for your loved ones?
Like sometimes I hear my listeners speaking in my ear and going, Tracy, this sounds really big. What are some really easy, quick hits that we can do that don't sound like they're going to cost us a ton of money and be really hard to implement?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost is just that communication piece. Sending an email doesn't cost anything. So it's helping employees access the information from, anything from awards programs or doing a team building activity can really help in that inclusivity aspect and really helping an employee feel welcome and that they belong within the company culture.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And that company culture is something that's really important because yes, it's benefits, but it's also how we're having those conversations at the water cooler if we're back at work, right? Or how we're creating, those conversations even virtually, especially as we're blending individuals and saying, hey, you know what? We're going to be an organization that you only need to be in the office 20% of the time. And some of our staff will be 100% virtual. So ensuring that we're still creating that inclusion in our work by creating those spaces is a communication piece, and not everybody loves email. So what are those other ways we can do it? There's something really kind of antiquated out there called a letter and a stamp, and sometimes it really means a lot.
It is a funny, cultural shift that now getting a letter in the mail is exciting, whereas before it was so basic.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that this takes us into what are some really budget-friendly ways to do it? Yes, stamps are going up. I think they're 39 cents or maybe they're 42. I don't even know.
They're like 75 cents nowadays.
Are they? Well, see, looking, I'm behind. But what are some of those really budget-friendly things that we can do to bring inclusion to our workplace, really look at that within our total comp and benefits packages?
Yeah, so a lot of it comes around team building activities. You're really looking at volunteerism. How can you create like a focus group, an employee resource group, really opportunities for the employees to interact and really build upon each other and how they want to build that company culture and have that inclusivity. If you do have a slightly bigger budget, you can do, a broader spectrum of like fringe benefits or doing, rewards programs on a more robust level, but really quick and easy wins. Some of it's a policy perspective too, of if your initiatives are supporting diversity and inclusion, but your benefits don't cover domestic partners, that's an easy policy change that can push you in a more inclusive direction. But a lot of it, it's really what does the company want to do? And taking that look in the mirror of where are you today and where are you trying to get to? And getting the leadership buy-in and the HR team in cohesion of what are we trying to accomplish and by what metrics are we going to measure success?
Absolutely. And having those metrics there is incredibly important. And you had mentioned employer resource groups or ERGs previously. And if you're interested in learning more about ERGs, take a listen to podcast number 43, where we talk with Toby Ujabina with Chezzy, specifically about how he has really kind of created almost a glass door for culture for individuals, with diversity inside of organizations. And we chat in that podcast a lot about how to actually build effective employee resource groups. So I love that you brought that up, Rachel.
I love ERGs. We have 3 ERGs at Johnson, and they have done wonders for just getting people connected more than anything. Knowing that you're in a group that has a similar mindset and trying to achieve the same goals is fantastic.
That's amazing. So as we kind of round out our conversation around, the gratitude towards our staff, and ensuring that we're doing it, right? So I'm curious, what's one key takeaway that you have for executives listening to our show today?
Yeah, so on the executive level, I think it's really having the clarity on what they're trying to accomplish. You can see the metrics of, 37 cents of every payroll dollar is lost due to poor employee engagement. So it's what is that one thing that their employees are looking for that you can move the needle in a meaningful way. And that's going to be different for every employer, but it's really being open to that conversation of maybe doing things a little bit differently than you used to.
What about for HR professionals listening in?
Yeah, so HR really, gets the brunt of the actionable steps of how to implement. They're kind of sold the dream and they have to make it work in some respects. And so for HR, it's really, I think, more on a policy level, but also finding those opportunities to engage with the employees in a meaningful way. So executives might be looking at the strategic of where do we want to go, where HR might be more boots on the ground of I know my employees are going to react better if we do a company picnic versus a virtual trivia night. So really, having that finger on the pulse of what your company is looking for.
Absolutely. And I think a key here too is that authenticity, that as leaders, as HR, you have an incredible amount of clout in that organization and you're being watched. And when you can show up and be truly authentic in your role, guess what? That will be replicated throughout the organization.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So if you're looking to connect with Rachel, you can find Rachel by pulling up her LinkedIn profile, which will be in our show notes. And the link to the Johnson Financial Group website is also in those show notes. If you are looking for some additional information on how we're actually implementing these talent strategies and this people plan into the organization, please feel free to join us in our Talent Optimization Foundation program. And thank you so much for being with us today. And Rachel, thank you so much for your insights.
Thanks, Tracy. Happy to be here.
Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Talent Optimization Podcast. You'll find more tools and resources for CEOs and HR professionals looking to bridge the strategies versus implementation gap of talent optimization at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. We've also created a free, valuable resource for you to begin bridging the gap called the Talent Optimization Foundation Membership Program. You can access it for free at elevatedtalentconsulting.com/foundation. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode to learn more about talent optimization and creating a dream team for your organization.